Welcome to Math Science History, a podcast dedicated to bringing the topics of math and science through the lens of history. In today's episode, we're focusing on Black Canadian scientists whose contributions have shaped Canada and the global scientific community. I'm Gabrielle Dvořák. I'm an author and a speaker with a background in math, science, and journalism. By the time you are done listening to this, you will know more about William Allen Jones, Anderson, Ruffin Abbott, and Sophia Bethena Jones. In the year 415, the infamous philosopher and mathematician Hypatia of Alexandria, Egypt, was savagely murdered by church monks. This murder shocked the Roman community and its government leaders. Hypatia was known far and wide as a respected philosopher, mathematician, government advisor, and a professor. Hypatia, The Sum of Her Life, is a book that I wrote that looks not just at the circumstances surrounding her death, but also at the sum of her entire life. I weave in the details of her education, disciples, Neoplatonic philosophies, female contemporaries, and the many mathematics that she wrote and taught about. There is truly more to Hypatia's life than her death. Hypatia, The Sum of Her Life, written by me, Gabrielle Dvořák, is now on sale on Amazon. Buy your copy today. It's February, and in Canada, Germany, and the United States, it's Black History Month, when we reflect on the inspiring impact of many Black individuals and those of African heritage. As a side note, Black History Month is celebrated in October in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and the Netherlands. It's a special month reserved for not only reminding the world about Black history, but also for educating oneself about the resilience of many Black individuals. It's also a time to understand how and why discrimination has been weaved into so many countries and political systems, and how we can eradicate systemic racism. I highly recommend learning about the history of racism and how it conditioned your culture. I also recommend that we all be fearless enough to confront our own biases and acknowledge the conscious and unconscious prejudice within ourselves. The only way we are going to unravel the injustice of racism is to start by looking within. That noted, before I start my podcast, I want to share a list of just a few of my favorite books for you to read to fully understand how racism is systemic and has been part of the propaganda that has conditioned us into our current mindset. I will provide a longer list on my website at mathsciencehistory.com. Most of these books are written by Black authors. Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi. The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindedness by Michelle Alexander. The Price for Their Pound of Flesh by Dana Ramey Berry. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. This is a really powerful book that explores how individuals and institutions perpetuate racism, and it offers a framework for actively dismantling it. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo, another impactful book that not only breaks down systemic racism, but it also provides excellent advice on how to have productive discussions about race. Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption by Brian Stevenson, and this book is a memoir by a civil rights lawyer. It exposes the injustices of the American legal system, particularly against Black individuals. This book won an NAACP Image Award and a Carnegie Medal for nonfiction. Canada's Forgotten Slaves, 2 Centuries of Bondage by Marcel Trudel and translated by George Toombs. It's one of the most comprehensive studies of slavery in Canada, covering the 17th to the 19th centuries, including how enslaved Indigenous and African people were bought, sold, and exploited in New France and British North America. These are all great books that I hope you check out, and also check the list on my website at mathsciencehistory.com. And now on with the podcast. I'm going to list the 3 individuals in chronological order, starting with William Allen Jones, who was born around 1831 in Raleigh, North Carolina, and emerged as a pioneering figure in Canadian history, notably as British Columbia's first licensed dentist. His journey from the American South to the western frontiers of Canada is a testament to his resilience, ambition, and commitment to community service. Jones was born to Alan and Temperance Jones and had 5 siblings: James, John, Elias, Sophia, and another whose name remains unknown. His father purchased the family's freedom for $5,000, which was a significant sum at the time. His father tried to establish a school for Black children in North Carolina. However, the persistent hostility and repeated arson by local white residents forced the family to relocate to Oberlin, Ohio. Jones pursued higher education in this more progressive environment and graduated from Oberlin College with a Bachelor of Arts in 1857. Following his graduation, Jones, along with his brothers Elias and John, moved to California. In 1859, they joined a wave of African Americans migrating to the colony of Vancouver Island, settling on Salt Spring Island. While John remained on Salt Spring Island as a teacher, William and Elias were drawn to the Caribou Gold Rush, leading them to Barkerville in British Columbia. After the American Civil War in 1865, Jones returned to Oberlin College to further his dental studies. After he completed his education, he returned to Barkerville and, in 1876, established his dental practice. At a time when formal licensing was not yet mandated, Jones offered dental services to the burgeoning population of Barkerville. He became affectionately known as, quote, Painless Jones, due to his use of medicinal techniques to minimize discomfort during dental procedures. Likely he was using alcohol, laughing gas, also known as nitrous oxide, and topical cocaine. His advertisements in the Caribou Sentinel highlighted his commitment to painless dentistry, a significant appeal even today. In 1886, the British Columbia government enacted the Dental Act, introducing formal regulations for the practice of dentistry in the province. On June 26, 1886, Jones became the first person to be granted a license under this new legislation, officially recognizing him as British Columbia's first licensed dentist. Jones continued to serve the Barkerville community until his death from pneumonia in 1897. He was laid to rest in the Williams Creek Cemetery. Today, Barkerville stands as a National Historic Site of Canada, with Jones's reconstructed dental office featured prominently on its main street. The British Columbia Dental Association played a significant role in the 1961 reconstruction, donating equipment and assisting in developing the exhibit. His tribute ensures that visitors can appreciate the contributions of a man who provided essential services during a formative period in the province's history and broke racial barriers in the professional realm. Jones' life reflects a narrative of perseverance and dedication, from securing his education against the backdrop of systemic racism to establishing himself as a trusted professional in a frontier town. Jones exemplified the spirit of determination. Anderson Ruffin Abbott was a pioneering figure in Canadian history, known for being the country's first Black physician and for his commitment to civil rights, education, and social progress. Abbott was born 6 years after Jones, and like Jones, Abbott's life spanned a critical period in North American history, marked by the Civil War, the fight for racial equality, and the abolition of slavery. Through his medical practice, military service, and advocacy, Abbott left a lasting impact on Canada and the United States, inspiring future generations of Black professionals and activists. Abbott was born in Toronto, Ontario, on April 7, 1837, into a well-educated and successful Black family. His parents, Wilson Ruffin Abbott and Ellen Toyer Abbott, were free African Americans who had fled Alabama to escape the dangers of racial persecution. The Abbotts settled in Canada, where they became prosperous business owners and prominent community members. There in Toronto, they started a family. Wilson Abbott worked as a general merchant and a real estate investor, ensuring that his children had access to quality education and opportunities for advancement. Growing up in a family that valued education and self-reliance, Abbott received an exceptional early education. He attended the Buxton Mission School, a highly respected institution for Black students in Ontario, and later enrolled at the Toronto Academy. Abbott was an outstanding student, excelling in science and mathematics, which paved the way for his future medical career. In 1857, Abbott began his studies at the Toronto School of Medicine, which was affiliated with the University of Toronto. During this time, Black students faced significant discrimination in higher education, and Abbott's journey was not without challenges. Despite these obstacles, he persevered, received his medical license in 1861, and made history as the first Canadian-born Black physician. Shortly after obtaining his medical license, the Civil War began in the United States, and so Abbott became deeply involved in efforts to support African Americans affected by the Civil War in the United States. The war lasted for 4 years and was a defining moment in the fight against slavery. Many free Black Canadians saw it as their duty to aid the Union cause. Abbott chose to serve as a civilian surgeon, traveling to the United States to provide medical care to wounded soldiers. In 1863, Abbott was appointed as a contract surgeon with the Union Army, serving at the Freedmen's Hospital in Washington, D.C. The hospital, established to care for newly freed Black people and wounded Union soldiers, was a critical institution during and after the war. Abbott was among a few Black doctors in the Union Army. He was designated as a first lieutenant, and his work earned him profound respect, not only from his colleagues, but also from Abraham Lincoln. During his time in Washington, Abbott had the rare privilege of meeting President Abraham Lincoln on a few occasions. In his first meeting with the president, he writes that as he and Major Alexander T. Augusta entered the White House, all eyes were on them. When it came to their turn to meet President Lincoln, Lincoln's son, Robert, asked the president if he was going to, quote, allow this innovation, unquote. That was a pretentious way of asking the president if he was going to greet Abbott and Augusta, let alone allow them in the White House. Abbott writes that after that, quote, the president replied promptly, why not? Abbott notes that the president gave Augusta a hearty shake and then shook hands with him. He writes, we passed on to a position in front of Mrs. Lincoln and was again introduced to that lady. We then passed out into a room on the opposite side from where we entered called the East Room, and there we were destined to undergo an ordeal in comparison with which what we had experienced thus far, it was only a dream. The moment we entered the room, which was crowded and brilliantly lit up, we became the cynosure of all eyes. I never experienced such a sensation before as I did when I entered the room. We could not have been more surprised ourselves or created more surprise if we had been dropped down upon them through a skylight. I suppose it was because it was the first time in history of the United States when a colored man had appeared at one of these levees. What made us more conspicuous, of course, was our uniforms. Colored men in the uniforms of U.S. military officers of high rank had never been seen before. I felt as though I should have liked to crawl into a hole. But as we decided to break the record, we held our ground. I bit my lips. I took Augusta's arm and sauntered around the room, devouring or pretending to view the very fine pictures which adorn the walls. I tried also to become interested in the beautiful music discoursed by the Marine Band, but it was the first time the music had failed to absorb my attention. Whenever we went, a space was cleared for us, and we became the center of a new circle of interest. Some stared at us merely from curiosity, others with an expression of friendly interest, while others again scowled at us in such a significant way that left no doubt as to what views they held on the Negro question, unquote. After Lincoln's assassination in April 1865, Abbott was one of the Black physicians invited to attend the president's deathbed. This was a testament to his standing in the medical and political communities. This moment was deeply significant for Abbott, reinforcing his commitment to both medicine and civil rights. After the war, Abbott returned to Canada, where he resumed his medical practice and continued to advocate for racial equality. He established himself in Chatham, Ontario, a city with a significant Black population, many of whom had escaped slavery via the Underground Railroad. Abbott's medical practice served both Black and white patients, and he became a respected figure in the community. Beyond medicine, Abbott was a strong proponent of education and social progress. He believed that access to education was the key to Black advancement in Canada, and he worked tirelessly to support schools and institutions that promoted literacy and professional development for Black Canadians. He also wrote extensively about racism, discrimination, and the importance of Black self-sufficiency, publishing articles in various newspapers and journals. Abbott was deeply involved in civil rights and community activism throughout his life. He was an outspoken advocate for racial equality and worked to challenge discriminatory practices in Canadian society. Abbott's advocacy took many forms, including serving on the board of several Black community organizations and speaking publicly about issues of race and inclusion. He also collaborated closely with other prominent Black leaders in Canada and the United States, building networks to improve conditions for African Americans and Black Canadians. One of Abbott's most significant contributions to public service was his tenure as the coroner of Kent County, Ontario, in the 1890s. This appointment made him the first Black coroner in Canada, another groundbreaking achievement in his career. His role as a coroner allowed him to influence public health and medical policies in the region, further solidifying his impact on Canadian society. In his later years, Abbott continued being active in medicine and community service. He moved to Dundas, Ontario, where he practiced medicine and remained involved in various social causes. And even as he aged, he continued to write and speak on race, education, and public health issues. Abbott's contributions to Canadian society extended beyond his lifetime, influencing future generations of Black physicians, scholars, and activists. He paved the way for other Black Canadians to enter the medical profession. He proved that perseverance and excellence could break down racial barriers. Abbott passed away on December 29, 1913. Today, he is remembered as a trailblazer in Canadian medicine and civil rights, whose efforts helped shape a more inclusive society. His work demonstrated that Black Canadians could make remarkable achievements in the face of adversity, and his story continues to inspire those striving for racial equality and professional excellence. Sophia Bethena Jones, born in 1839 in the United States, made history as one of the first Black women to achieve prominence as an educator in Canada. Moving to Canada in the mid-19th century, she became an essential figure in the fight for Black education, not only as a teacher, but also as an advocate for the rights and equality of Black people in Canada. Her life and work are a testament to resilience, determination, and the power of education in transforming society. Jones was born into slavery in the United States. Her family escaped to Canada via the Underground Railroad. Her family settled in Toronto, where she would become an influential educator and a force for social change. She was a student at Wilberforce Collegiate Institute before she completed her bachelor's degree in science in biology at the University of Toronto in 1879. She applied to the University of Toronto's medical school. However, the school did not accept her because she was a Black woman. Instead, the University of Michigan Medical School accepted her, where she received her MD in 1885. Upon graduation, she returned to Toronto. Her rejection from the medical school made her realize the disparities that Black people face in accessing quality education. Jones learned the importance of offering Black Canadians the same learning opportunities available to white Canadians. She dedicated herself to teaching and working to provide better educational opportunities for the Black community. Sophia Jones was not the only prominent member of her family. Her brother, the Reverend William H. Jones, was a notable figure in the community as well, and was also dedicated to advocating for the rights of Black people. The siblings worked together to promote social justice, equality, and better educational access for Black Canadians. Jones' career as an educator began in the 1860s when she opened one of the first schools for Black children in Toronto. This school was founded at a time when education for Black Canadians was often limited to poorly funded, segregated schools. Black children in Canada were often denied access to quality schooling, and Jones' initiative to open her own school was a bold and necessary move to combat the educational inequities that existed for Black Canadians. The school that Jones founded was intended to offer a safe and supportive learning environment for Black children, where they could receive a proper education and learn without the racial prejudices that were prevalent in the wider society. Jones' curriculum was not just focused on traditional subjects like reading, writing, and math. She also significantly emphasized moral education, civic responsibility, and community service. Her teachings were rooted in the idea that education could empower individuals to overcome systemic racism and uplift the Black community. In addition to running her own school, Jones actively advocated for the integration of Black children into the public school system. Jones believed that the existing school system could and should be reformed to better serve Black children, offering them opportunities for advancement alongside their white peers. Jones' commitment to improving the lives of the oppressed did not end with her work as an educator. Her advocacy helped to lay the groundwork for future generations of Black activists and educators who would continue to push for racial justice and equality in Canada. Jones' contributions to Black Canadian identity are immeasurable. Her pioneering work in education created an essential foundation. It helped shape the next generation of Black Canadians who would become leaders, activists, and educators. By founding one of the first schools for Black children in Toronto, Jones provided young Black Canadians with the tools they needed to succeed and gave them a sense of pride and dignity in their heritage. Jones' impact is still felt today as her work inspired other Black Canadians to engage with education as a means of personal empowerment and a way to change the broader social and political landscape. Her dedication to ensuring that Black Canadians had access to education and the tools for success helped break down barriers and create a more inclusive society. Jones also made essential contributions to the development of Black women's leadership in Canada. In a time when Black women were often relegated to the margins of both the education system and society, Jones' work showed that Black women could be powerful agents of change. She used her position as an educator and community leader to uplift Black women and encourage them to take on leadership roles, both in their communities and in the broader Canadian society. Her legacy continues to inspire educators and activists working towards racial justice and educational equity. Her emphasis on moral education, community service, and activism provided a blueprint for future generations of Black educators and leaders who sought to use their work as a tool for social change. As we reflect on the legacies of William Allen Jones, Anderson Ruffin Abbott, and Sophia Bethena Jones, we recognize that their journeys were not just about personal achievement. They were acts of defiance against a system that sought to hide Black excellence. Their resilience, intellect, and determination carved paths where none existed, proving that progress is possible even in the face of systemic barriers. However, Black History Month is not just about the past. Black History Month is about the present and everyone's role in the future. We are all responsible for looking inward, seeing the unconscious racism within us and removing the boundaries that the Black community faces. It's not the responsibility of the Black community to break these boundaries. It is the responsibility of those who are government leaders and those who have access to privilege to deny and oppose programs that offer diversity, equity, and inclusion is a deliberate act of prejudice. Progress is never given, and it is most often denied to Black communities. Each new Black generation worldwide is continually faced with obstacles. And as a white woman, I recognize my privilege. And honestly, I'm ashamed of the injustice that my heritage has inflicted on Black communities. It breaks my heart that I have access to more opportunities than my Black brothers and sisters. And it is infuriating that they have to fight to reclaim and rebuild with each new generation. And though these pioneers are an inspiration for those who strive for equity, representation, and justice, at what point will these barriers be eternally destroyed so that Black, African Americans, African Canadians, and marginalized individuals can move forward on equal footing? This is a question worth asking not only of our government leaders and those with privilege, but it is also a question worth asking of ourselves. So this month, may we amplify Black voices, lift up the underserved by creating opportunities, and ensure that the barriers and obstacles that the predecessors destroyed are never rebuilt. Thank you for listening. Until next time, carpe diem. Thank you for joining me at Math, Science, History. Please remember to subscribe to the show. Also, if you could leave a rating or a review, I would truly appreciate that. Those ratings and reviews really help to increase my listenership, which help me get more sponsors and advertisers, which help me keep the podcast up and running. If you want to learn more about the history of math and science, please visit me at mathsciencehistory.com. There you can find the transcripts and additional information to each topic, as well as additional links to other sites. Oh, and hey, if you like what you're listening to, and you like what you're reading, please feel free to click on that cup of coffee and make a donation to the podcast, because every cup of coffee that you buy helps me to pay for the expenses that go into making this podcast. If you would like an early peek and listen to the podcast, you can follow me on Patreon, where you can choose a tier or even pick your own price. Or you can also subscribe to Math, Science, History on Medium, where you can read an early release of the podcast, which includes the math. Also, if you're interested in having me speak at your school or your event, please visit me at GabrielleBurchak.com. I would love to come share the world of math, science, and history with you, your audience, and your students. Finally, if you're interested in leaving me a comment or submitting a podcast topic, you can always find me and Math, Science, History on your preferred platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, or you can just search the Googly for Gabrielle Burchak. Until next time, carpe diem.